Vivian, welcome. Thanks for doing the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Most welcome. I'm glad to be talking to you, Jay.
Now, we're going to start off with your big break, actually, was with Dio in '83, which sort of leads us back to where we're going to go. You left after a couple of years. You went to Whitesnake for a year or two, something like that. You've worked with Lou Gramm, and finally you joined Def Leppard back in '92, who you've been with ever since. And then I guess it was, around 2000 and...
About the middle of 2011. It was about a year or so after Ronnie had passed away, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, coincidentally around that time, Leppard had taken about a year or a year and a half off where we were essentially not doing much of anything. And I got a call from Scott Gorham of Thin Lizzy asking if he could borrow me for several months to be a stunt guitar player with Thin Lizzy. And I, of course, jumped at the chance. And so a few things happened around that time that led up to the formation of what would be the Last in Line band, and that was one of them. I mean, going on tour for several months and playing the songs of my youth, you know, playing Emerald and playing Boys Are Back and Don't Believe a Word and Black Rose, all these great guitar riffs and solos with Scott Gorham, and Brian Downey, the original drummer, was in the band at the time too. So it really kind of just it got me really excited about, you know, reconnecting to my earlier years as a guitarist, and you know, like I said, it was also about a year after Ronnie had passed away, and maybe that had something to do with it too, that you know, the Dio band was no longer in existence, and so, you know, one thing led to another, and I originally just wanted to jam, and I called Jimmy Bain and Vinny Appice, and we went into a room and started jamming, and at that point it had been about 27 to 28 years since we'd played together, and it was just, the chemistry was just immediate, and we all got very, very excited about it, and Vinny said, we need someone to sing this stuff. I know this guy Andrew Freeman, and let me give him a call. So Andy comes down and starts singing, and sounds nothing like Ronnie. I mean, you know, is a very powerful singer, you know, like Ronnie was, but has a totally different tonality, obviously, and that's what got me kind of thinking, you know. I mean, when Jimmy and Vinny and I played, it was an unmistakable sound of the early Dio band. Here was a singer who took it in a different direction because he had a different tonality to his voice, but was equally as powerful, you know. So that's kind of what led to it. And to be honest, Jay, if I'd known that all these years later, you know, we would be out promoting our second album of original music, I don't think I would have called the band Last in Line. You know, it seemed like a cute sort of a name at the time because, you know, obviously, like I said, it was a year or more after Ronnie had passed, and so Jimmy and Vinny and I, we were the Last in Line, and that obviously was the name of a song and the second album that we did with Ronnie.
Which you wrote the riff to, correct?
Yes, yeah. Well, we are, you know, a lot of those early songs were very collaborative. You know, somebody would throw something in. I had a little intro riff in the main part, and then Jimmy threw a little da-da, 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 the verse riffs, and, you know, one thing led to another, so it's, you know, and Vinny did the backbeats and then, you know, made it stylistically ours. I mean, that's, you know, the magic of the early Dio records came about that way, you know. It wasn't always just somebody coming in with a song. I mean, it was kicking things around, and that was, I remember the night we wrote that song, you know, that it all came together at Sound City Rehearsal Studios in LA, and I remember that was the night Ronnie was confident that we had what we needed so we could book the studio. We booked Caribou Ranch out in Colorado, and we scheduled the recording of the second album. But up to that point, Ronnie held off on booking a studio because he didn't feel that we had the centerpiece for an album. We didn't have the title track, you know, and every record, you know, Ronnie believed really needed to have that sort of an anchor, and that was the song, obviously, that anchored that album. So anyway, but I called the band Last in Line because I just thought we were going to go out and play some club shows around LA, playing songs from the early Dio catalog.
Right.
I had no idea it was going to grow into this, but one thing led to another, and then we played some regional West Coast shows, and then we got offered the chance to go to Europe, and we did some festivals, went to Japan, and so several years later, about 2014 or early 15, we get a call from Frontiers Record Company asking, would you guys be interested in writing and recording new music? And up to that point, we honestly didn't think about it, because everyone else had a day job and still does. It's very much just a side project for all of us. But having said that, it's become a very, very serious side project. So it's when I'm not working with Def Leppard, I'm working with Last in Line pretty much constantly. So it's a very, very serious project, and we're all very, very dedicated to it. We want to make it everything it can be. But there has been a little bit of confusion over the band name, being named after the second Dio album and that title track of it, So, which is one of the reasons why I elected to just call this our second album just 2, like the Roman numerals 2, because I didn't want to add another name in there, like with our debut album Heavy Crown from 2016. There's a little bit of confusion, like, well, is the band Heavy Crown, is the band Last in Line? So I trying to streamline it as much as possible. I even, like, in a lot of our artwork, I'm trying to steer it towards just LIL, so that becomes a symbol of the band.
I noticed that.
Trying to take out some of the confusion.
Well, let me ask you, when you got the call from Frontier Records, did you guys have any writing for Heavy Crown, or did you say, okay, we're going to do this?
We had nothing. We had no ambition to
So once Frontier
album.
called, you guys said, well, let's write an album.
Yeah, and then they give us a reasonable amount of money to be able to do it. There's no such thing as a generous record deal anymore in this day and age. But they give us enough to actually pique our interest. We went, okay, well, let's we can afford to hire a studio with this. And we got Jeff Pilson, who turned out to be a godsend. A very, very talented producer and engineer and writer, and just an all-round musician in his own.
So I've heard. I talked to Vinny last week, and he said the same exact thing.
Yeah, and Jeff's energy is so good too. He keeps everyone on the boil and keeps everyone lighthearted and funny and upbeat, and so we went in there and stuff happened really, really quick. We wrote the Heavy Crown album with Jimmy. Obviously, Jimmy was still alive then, and it was very much like we did those early Dio albums. We'd go into a room and Jimmy would have a riff, or I'd have a riff, or if nobody had a riff, Vinny would just start playing some monster beat that's so inspiring that you just find something to play along with it. And over a matter of a couple of hours, something would materialize that was interesting, and then we'd kind of think, okay, well, does that sound like a verse or a chorus or an intro, or what does it sound like to you guys? And we'd kind of cobble it together and make what we felt was a workable arrangement for a singer. And back in the early 80s, that singer was Ronnie, and these days it's Andy, So we would track something, we'd record in the rehearsal room, and we'd send it off to Andy, and Andy's very quick, like Ronnie was, very quick about turning around a song, and he'd let us know if it was something he could write to, or if he wanted us to change something. And occasionally, he would be in the room with us. Logistically, Andy's living in Vegas and the rest of us in LA area, so he wasn't always in the same room at the same time, but sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't, and we kind of worked it really, really quick, and then we had, all of a sudden, we had these 10, 11, 12 songs for an album, and the same with the second album here that just came out in February. We are now working with Phil Suzanne since Jimmy passed away.
Yes, I'm aware.
And Phil has been a perfect fit for the band, and writes really, really well too, and really I think has upped our musical ability. I think Phil's a very ambitious bass player, very adventurous. Jimmy was a very fundamental player, just with epic tone and feel and timing. And Phil plays a bit more like, I think like Geezer Butler did with Black Sabbath, like John Entwistle did with The Who, like really, really kind of finding parts to play, not just for the sake of it, not overplaying, but finding a gap and just making a musical part out of it and a feature out of it. And, so it makes for a very interesting three-piece band, essentially, guitar, bass, drums with a singer. We're not playing with a keyboard player anymore, so it really kind of is a throwback sort of a band, like from the 60s or 70s. It's got that kind of that madness to it musically,
Yeah, but it's really, it's heavy, it's hard, and it sounds fresh. It's a great album.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, we're really pleased with it. I think that Andrew has come on a long way as a singer and as a lyricist on this record, as a writer. And like I said, with Phil's contributions, it kind of pushed us a bit more to be more adventurous. And I'm really, really pleased with my guitar playing at the moment. I think with the Heavy Crown album in 2016, I was really kind of feeling my way back into it, into playing this really sort of aggressive hard rock again, and I feel really, really comfortable with my playing in recent years, and I'm very, very pleased with what I did on the record. And like I say, it's inspiring to me. It really was a way for me to kind of reconnect with that original fire and that original passion that I always kind of felt as a teenager, and that really kind of pushed me into the career choice,
Now, you guys are on tour. You started up earlier this month. Now, you're on tour. This is how busy you are. I went over this and I said, this is amazing. You're on tour with Last in Line until June. Then you go with Def Leppard to do Download. July, you do a Canadian tour with Def Leppard. Then you'll be back in Las Vegas for your residency. Then you do the Exit 111 tour in Tennessee, which is a brand new tour. Then October, Last in Line goes back out on the road. It's crazy.
And then we're going to Europe right after that at the end of November.
That was my next question. What do you do after that?
The thing is, there's a couple of reasons why I do this. First and foremost, I'm grateful that I can. I really, really, really enjoy my work, and I get the chance to not only play in one great band, but two great bands. I mean, Def Leppard is one of the greatest rock bands of all time.
Love them, always have, been into them since the beginning.
It's a very, very different thing to Last in Line, and I get to be in these two incredible bands, and so it's a real joy to do it. And secondly, Def Leppard doesn't need any help. I mean, we're a very, very successful band,
sure.
and we continue to see our audience grow, and younger generations getting turned on to the music and stuff. But with Last in Line, we're a new band, but with a heritage. But it's in this day and age, especially, it's really, really difficult to rise above the noise,
It is, I know.
You can't just put out a record, do a video or two, and do some interviews and whatever. You really, really have to manifest it. You got to take it out there and play live shows and build your audience and build your reputation, and that's what I'm prepared to do with Last in Line. It's very, very much a labor of love, and I really, really believe in it, and I really, really enjoy doing it. It makes me very happy. It's very cathartic to me. But it's hard work. I'm still doing treatment for cancer. I've got a chemo headache that I had a treatment in LA yesterday for my immunotherapy, and it's like I keep forgetting how bad I feel the day after. But I'll feel great when we go on stage tonight. Because
well, you sound great, and I'm happy to hear that because I was going to ask you how you're feeling. So that's great news. I'm very fortunate. I find this one of these new wonder drugs that's been working well for me and holding everything in place, and been doing it almost 4 years. This particular drug, and it's the hardest part about it, to be honest, is scheduling, because I am traveling so much. I've got to schedule it in advance, and sometimes I got to do treatments on the East Coast as opposed to the West Coast, and that requires calling insurance companies and spinning plates. I wondered about that. I'm like, how does he do this when he's traveling so much? So
it's really difficult. Like I've literally over the 6 or so years I've been dealing with the cancer, I've flown from Singapore all the way to Los Angeles to do a treatment, and then flown on to London the next day because I had to be in LA when I was part of a clinical trial for the first 2 years, and I had to be under their roof while I was getting treatment. So, I've literally done that. I've flown back from London all the way to LA and done a treatment and gone back to London that night.
Wow.
It's been insane. I mean, it really has been nuts. But I'm very grateful that my bandmates in Def Leppard, cut me a lot of slack with that, particularly, a few years ago when things were really rough and I was doing hardcore chemo, and, they took a chance with me. They knew I wanted to work, and that was important for my being able to deal with it. And I will always appreciate their support on that.
And that's one thing about there's many things about Def Leppard, but Def Leppard, as I don't need to tell you or anybody listening to this, they have been through a lot. So it doesn't surprise me that they stayed supportive and said, okay, Viv, let's work this out.
Yeah, at first they wanted me to stay home and convalesce, which is a natural reaction, and you would think that, most people probably would want to do that. But for me, I always knew I was determined to continue working, and I'm convinced that was part of my being able to deal with it so well, But, whatever works, different things, different strokes for different folks, as they say, But my work keeps me alive.
Well, that's for sure, because you certainly do a lot of it. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Def Leppard. I'm loving Last in Line. And more than anything, I am glad to hear that you're healthy, man.
Thanks, Jay. Cheers. All right. Nice to talk to you.
All right, man. Bye.
Bye.